And we're going to jump right in. So I think, Peter, my first question for you is, you have an interesting background, and particularly like work that you do. So how does are you practicing your Orthodox? How does your practice of your faith sort of inform your opinions and your viewpoints on policies?
Thanks. It's working? Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. I mean, the question of what exactly the Northwest is, so many people quibble about and I certainly do my best. I guess to me, one of the interesting things about Judaism that I've always known my whole life is that it's a religion with a universal message, just an ethical message, just like Christianity or Islam. But it's also the story, as Jews see it, the story of a family that becomes other people. And in Judaism, the metaphor of extended family is very powerful. We refer to ourselves as B'nai Israel, children in Israel. Israel being the name that Jacob was given after he wrestled with an angel in Genesis. So, to me, one of the things I always struggle with is how do I balance my obligations to my people that I imagine as kind of a Jewish or kind of the same family. The line says, "Oh, Israel," being said that all Jews are responsible for one another, with my obligations to all humanity. And I think that as a kid, when I started to learn something about Israel and Palestine, I thought, well, the solution to that would be for Jews to have a state, for Palestinians to have a state. Because again, Jews would have a state there where they could be safe. My grandmother in particular, who moved around in many places in her life, many Jewish communities that were very fragile, I always kind of amazed me that in the Jews have a country of their own, given our history, to keep Jews safe. But I realized as a teenager that it seemed wrong to me that Israel was controlling all of these people, all these Palestinians who didn't have basic human rights. So I thought, well, they would have their state and Israel would have its state, and that would be a way of balancing my obligations to other Jews with my obligations to all people. I had that view for a long time, and it was only over time that I began to reconsider it. Partly just because I felt like I was saying year after year after year that because of Israeli settlement growth, the possibility of creating a viable sovereign Palestinian state was becoming less and less. And actually, a Palestinian friend of mine at one point said to me, Peter, you can't just keep saying that the two-state solution is always about to die. At some point, you have to admit it's dead, and you have to think in different terms. So partly, I just felt like I had to take that prospect seriously, that even if it had been a possibility for partition at one point, it is no longer possible. I came across this column in 1982 in the New York Times called 5 Minutes to Midnight, in which Anthony Lewis, the columnist of the New York Times, said basically for 100,000 settlers in the West Bank, it won't be possible to create a viable Palestinian state. Well, now, if you include East Jerusalem, you have it equal to 700,000. So that was part of it. But the other part of it is that as I spent more time in the West Bank, I spent more time listening to Palestinians and reading Palestinian writing, which is really something I didn't do as a young person, unfortunately. It took me kind of later in my life to do that. I began to have questions about the whole idea of a Jewish state, a state that is based around the idea of privileging one ethnic or religious group. Certainly, I do not want America to be a Christian state. I believe in the principle of equality under law. The idea of a state that favors Jews over Palestinians. First of all, it means that Palestinian refugees would not be allowed to return because they would change the demography of Israel and mean that Jews didn't have a large demographic majority. And I began to feel increasingly uncomfortable with this language of like maintaining a demographic majority. I mean, the people who talk that way in the United States, like Tucker Carlson, keeping America's young up, are not people that I identify with, I want to be there. And I also began to think and learn and realize even that a Jewish state was a state where Palestinian citizens, because 20% of Israel's own citizens, some of them they call Arab Israelis, but they're Palestinians who have citizenship, unlike the Palestinians in the West Bank and East Jerusalem and Gaza who don't have citizenship. They are second-class citizens in a very profound way. You really look at the way Israel allocates land. And I as a Jew would never want to be a second-class citizen in the United States, so why should I expect them to be a second-class citizen? So over time, I began to think that the idea of one equal state, that gave everyone a parallel and reflected the identities of both Jews and Palestinians, would be that would still be a way for me of reconciling my obligations to Jews with my fundamental obligations to all people, including Palestinians, to be treated equally. And the reason I think, in a lot of parts of the Jewish community, the idea that one equal state would be a state where Jews would be safe is something that I really have a hard time getting my mind around. But the more I began to think about it, the more actually I began to think that in the long term, I think Jews in Israel will be the most safe if Palestinians have full freedom and full equality. Because when you deny people equality, you're inflicting a lot of violence. It may not be always apparent to you how much violence you are inflicting, just like it's not always so apparent to other Americans how much violence the state is inflicting on black people. But a system of inequality is very violent. And when you inflict violence on people, you are also in the long term making yourself. Because that violence sooner or later comes back and it makes them violent. So I came to the view that just as I believe that I believe that it is best for everyone, Palestinians and Jews in Israel, to have the same principle of fighting for here, and that I believe in everywhere around the world, which is that regardless of your religion, your ethnicity, or your race, or anything else, the state should treat you exactly equally around the world. And that, I think, that's what happened when apartheid ended in South Africa. That's why South Africa now feels this great kind of moral mission around the world to teach people from their experience. And when I saw the South African delegation at the International Court of Justice, I thought, wow, imagine, because if you look at the South African delegation, it was very multiracial. South Africa is a very multiracial country. I thought, imagine if one day you could have an Israel-Palestine, Palestine-Israel, and its borders would be Jewish, and Palestinian, and Christian, and Muslim, and Druze, and Armenian, everything would go to an international court and say, look at our experience, how we overcame oppression, and we live together equally, and we have a message for the world. So that's what I think. So, mentioned, lawyers, and so we decided to moderate this and talk about sort of a friendly cross-examination of Peter, because we're not here just to be question on a piece of paper that people follow and people go as much as we can. We do intend to challenge him a little bit on some of these views, and mostly because I think you understand none of us really know what option we're looking at, and any of these options will solve the conflict. So I do want to, I have a two-part question, because I think along the lines of what you've already sort of been talking about, and because there are a lot of prominent Palestinian activists and some people that I don't even know personally, but I know their work, and one in particular, Nora, who's human rights attorney. I know she's even read the news, but and I think she's an ally that still is critical of one state solution view. And how do you respond? And I guess maybe you could kind of tell the audience watching sort of what Nora's criticisms are, how you respond to it. Yeah. I'm not actually fully sure that I don't think she's necessarily critical of my vision of one state. She's a very, very brilliant person. I think one thing she did say that was right, that was critical of something that I had written recently was basically, I wrote an essay in the New York Times recently. So basically, my argument was that American Jews historically love themselves liberal and also love themselves in dominance. And my argument was that Zionism, certainly as it exists today, Israel, is fundamentally illiberal, fundamentally violates basic principles of treating people equally, irrespective of their background. And therefore, the American Jews, I think, are basically going to have to choose between these two items. But I also was writing about those Jews who are joining the kind of Palestine solidarity movement. No, there are a significant number of them, especially young people. And the point that I made was that the Palestine solidarity movement has to find a language that a language of equal coexistence. And I specifically quoted some things that Said had written that I found very inspiring, and also I quoted some things that Ali Lima wrote in his 2007 book, One Country. And I made a criticism of the phrase Palestine with peace. Not because I think that phrase is genocide, not because I think the phrase is anti-Semitic, because I don't think the phrase offers a vision. I don't think it really offers a very compelling vision of coexistence. If you said Palestinians would be free from coexisting, I think that would make a lot of sense. But when you say Palestine would be free from coexisting, and then you imagine that the entire territory, Israel, the West Bank, Gaza, East Jerusalem, will be again Palestine, then my question is, what does that mean for the identity of Israeli Jews? Presumably it means that they become Palestinians. And there were Jewish Palestinians, right? Palestinian, 100 years ago, 125 years ago, was an identity that could be held by the Jews, Christians, Muslims, but it doesn't seem to be realistic to imagine that Israeli Jews are going to become. And that's why I thought the phrase Palestine was not the best not the best slogan to use. I think Dora's criticism was basically, in the midst of this horrific, utter destruction and massacre in Gaza, it's not the right moment to ask Palestinians to kind of be what she would have seen as like extra generous. She, I think, said her Twitter, she said, like, I've done a lot of work around coexistence, but this isn't the right time to ask us to have that conversation. And I understand that. I mean, I understand what she's saying. Again, there are lots of people who I respect and learn from, with whom I have public disagreements, and to me, that's, again, part of the learning process.
So the second part of that, started with this part is, can you sort of frame for the why it's not possible that we just go back to 1967? Is there a pool or something inside the law? Right? Why can't we pull yourself
Right. Look, if there were a two-state solution that was endorsed by, in a legitimate way, by Palestinian law, I think it would hardly be for me to say, like, that's wrong, right? I think it would be in some way. It probably doesn't be need by, right? Because in the Israeli discourse, what a two-state solution means is that you maintain a Jewish state with a very large Jewish development. And so what that means is you can't have any significant Palestinian refugee problem, because significant Palestinian refugee problem would reduce Israel's Jewish majority. I don't think that's just. I think Palestinians have the right to return if they want to. But if Palestinian leadership decided that they were going to forego some element of that right, or exchange for getting a Palestinian state, again, it wouldn't be my place to say that's wrong. But I think it seems to be extremely unlikely. I mean, Israel withdrew 8,000 or 9,000 settlers from Gaza in 2005. That was actually like one of the most largest military operations ever. And by the way, if you notice, there are people in the civilian government who want to rebuild those settlements now. So even that, it's not clear that that's going to get that sustained. But the West Bank settlement population is much larger. You're talking about 7,000 to 8,000 versus in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem again, 650,000 to 700,000 in a territory, the West Bank, which is much more important than Gaza because of its biblical significance, huge significance. And you've got a lot of settlers in Israel who are now very deeply involved in the Israeli military. And even many of those settlers from Gaza went to the West Bank, right? In fact, the overall settler population increased even during the year of the Gaza engagement, in part because some of those settlers left settlements in Gaza and went to settlements in the West. So that's the reason that I'm really pessimistic about the possibility that you could withdraw enough settlers to actually create a viable housing state. And again, I guess I think, to me, part of the question is there's a lot of global support now for the question of Palestinian. And so one of the questions is really important is like, how do you take that movement and make it even bigger and bigger, politically stronger, so it can really have an influence on government policy? And I actually think a movement that says we want freedom and equality, equality with the law, living side by side with full equality, the same message of the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa, the same movement, the civil rights movement. It is actually a more powerful message than the message of partition into two kind of, ethnically based states. And then I think it actually could be more powerful and could be put more pressure ultimately on Israel and also on our own government to change policy. I have a question here. So I'm going to do the fire. Please.
So, first question. This is probably, let me ask you the answer yes or no. So, a one-state solution is an ethno state, right?
No, I mean, not the one state that exists today, the one state that I would like to see would not.
And how do we reconcile this the one-state solution that you're talking?
Yeah.
How does justice work? How does a judicial system work? There's a legal framework, right? How does that work and how does that apply? Fairly equally, right? The United States got equal protection. That's the right thing. Yeah. It's a broken system, but in theory, everything has state access and all those things.
Yeah.
How does that even work?
Right. So you kind of have to imagine something that doesn't exist today, right? You have to. I think one of the places I would start would be with the vision. So 20% of Israel's citizens are Palestinians. Most of the Palestinians under Israeli control are not citizens, right? There's about a military on the West Bank, blockade in Gaza, but the Palestinian citizens can vote. And if you look at what their political parties want, especially Kadash and Baba, not so much the Islamist party of Baba, but Kadash and Baba, to me, those are the most progressive, liberal visions that anybody is. And in 2018, 3 Palestinian members of the Knesset offered a basic law. Basic laws are like constitutional way laws in Israel. And it was a basic law for equality for all citizens. It basically said, they said this law, this should be a country in which all citizens are equal under the law with no discrimination based on race, religion, gender, anything else. And it should happen to be a state that respects the culture of these different people of countries in Palestine. To me, that was like the building block of country that I would like to see. But I would like to see it expanded not just in Israel proper, but through the West Bank. And I mean, I know a lot of people think like it's. I actually think that Israel-Palestine, for all of like the horrors that are taking place, has a lot of the building blocks of what it would take to make a successful liberal democracy work. First of all, one of the things that we know from political science is that one of the things that correlates with successful, stable liberal democracy is both Israeli Jews and Palestinians have extremely powerful. And I think that there is, and so I think that I think Israeli Jews and Palestinians living alongside each other equally would be a messy process, would be political difficulty. But when I look at Northern Ireland, or I look at South Africa, I see countries that were racked by violence, in which people who were basically on opposite sides and are now living together equally, and they've created political systems that can do that. So the details don't go into more. I know a little bit about the system in Northern Ireland, the system in Belgium, the system in South Africa. You have a mix and match from those, but I think the principle.
So, just kind of following up on that, and maybe delve into a little deeper words, because I know you publicly call yourself a Zionist, and I know that at least in this country, the debate, there has been a debate about, is that a good thing or bad, what to be the Zionist. And I just bear with me just a moment.
Sure.
Preparing for this, I spent a lot of time watching, a lot of your videos and posts. And one in particular struck me because we were talking about, the importance of acknowledging the apartheid that's happening. And we do 100%. One of the things that said that last show is that I don't care what we call it, call it apartheid, call it something else, just acknowledge it matters, right? And so I do think, and I think you just referenced choosing the word Palestine. Those words matter, they color perception and intent. And so considering, I think, global impressions of what impression design, and kind of follow up on Race's comments about I think with the government, at least the government that have been following this for decades, intend when they say Zion, they mean that. They mean apartheid, but I mean an application, of Zionism, it results in, so how do you reconcile sort of continuing to refer to yourself as a Zionist in a way that allows people to go really off? What is your definition?
Yes, absolutely. No, it's a very legitimate question because I don't support the Jewish state. I don't support a state that privileges Jews over Palestinians in any way, but I would call it Jewish supremacy. I literally wrote a column in your time that I don't believe in the Jewish state. So, in fact, what's funny about it is inside the Jewish community, certainly in my close community, no one believes this about anti-Zionism. They say, you're not, you're an anti-Zionist. So why would I actually say that this term still has value? Because you're right. The term is, for many people, understand that the term means the ideology of this state, which is a state based on Jewish supremacy, which I oppose. There were earlier different forms of Zionism before the creation of the state. One version called cultural Zionism, whose leaders actually opposed the idea of the Jewish state. So in 1947, for instance, Martin Luther, the Jewish philosopher Martin Luther, who called himself a cultural Zionist, testified against partition and the creation of the Jewish state in front of the UN as the Jew Magnus, founder of Hebrew University. So this was a Zionism which opposed the Jewish state. Now, why would I have any interest in this theoretical pre-existing Zionism, which is obviously not the Zionism? And the reason that I find those cultural Zionist writers valuable is that they were describing how Jewish culture could flourish under conditions of equality in Palestine. And to me, that's really important, especially when I speak inside the Jewish community. This actually is a little more unusual to me, because honestly, most of the talk I give are to largely Jewish. I mean, this is maybe lots of Jewish here too, right? But oftentimes I speak very much within Jewish institutions. And one of the things that I spend a lot of time trying to say, because a lot of people find it so hard to believe, is that I really don't believe that the end of Israel as a Jewish state means the end of Jewish life in Palestine and Israel. I actually believe that there's potential for great flourishing of Jews in Palestine and Israel under conditions of equality. And I want to show people that there were thinkers before the creation of the state who also believed that, who believed that the Jews could live and flourish and speak Hebrew in this place, and that they didn't need Jewish supremacy to do it. In fact, they would be better off with equality for Palestinians. So I totally understand why some people might find that term, it could be kind of get in the way in terms of the way some people journey. And so that is a challenge because I think for some people, I feel like in the Jewish community, we allow them to hear me more, but other people, it may allow them to hear me less, and that's challenging when you're, speaking to people. And just on the practical one I want to make, I do call Israel a part. They said I have written Israel a part. The point that I was making in the video is, what I would say to people, if they find the term really difficult or unpleasant, I would say, let's talk about what the realities are. Jews have legal supremacy over Palestinians. This is what it means in terms of Palestinian freedom of movement, in terms of military courts, in terms of land laws, Palestinians not being able to vote in the West Bank for the government to hold their life. And if you have a different term for that, I don't mind if you call it a different term, as long as you know more of the realities of what life is like on the ground.
So here's what I have said. Benjamin Netanyahu's sitting in the front row. Okay?
We'll make for a very interesting evening.
And based on what you just said, and on the fact that there is such a thing as contemporary Zionism, historic Zionism, there's a disconnect. What is your advice to him? And within the hour of that, what needs to change from a policy standpoint in Israel to get to the end point?
I mean, it's funny, you read Benjamin has written about this big book. It's called, it has two names, first and second version, called Place Among the Nations for Israel Peace. And one of the people who he writes, one of the people who really, one of his villains of that book is Judah Magnus, the cultural Zionist who opposed the creation of the Jewish state. So if I said, I'm a Zionist in the spirit of Judah Magnus, then that was a fighting word for Benjamin Netanyahu. I mean, I don't really know what one can say to Benjamin Netanyahu. I mean, the man is really dedicated his life to deepening and entrenching this profoundly inhumane, undemocratic, brutal system of oppression, and that's what he really believes. To me, I guess, I don't know what I can say much to Netanyahu. What I would say to Israeli Jews more generally is listen to Palestinians. There are a lot of Israeli Jews who really believe after October 7th that the only way that they can be safe and the only way that those communities that have in South Israel that were attacked or terrible massacres can be saved is if you destroy them. And they really believe that. Most Israeli Jews support this more, unfortunately. And what I would say to them would be, go and ask Palestinians whether they think this war is going to be I have not met Palestinians since this war is going to be safe. Far from it. Because I think Palestinians understand something which is very basic truth, which is that when you inflict massive destruction and violence on people, and people see whole members of their families killed, and their entire neighborhoods destroyed, and people on the brink of starvation, that is not a recipe for people. That's a recipe people want to use. And so that actually is going to make Israel less safe. I know that you can get focused on Hamas, and they don't like Hamas' ideology. Definitely don't like what Hamas did on October 7th, which I think was demolished on a violation of international law. But Israel's fundamental problem is not with Hamas. Israel's fundamental problem is with the Palestinian people. The Palestinians have been resisting their dispossession for a really long time, and will continue to resist, I think, until they gain freedom. And so Israel, and I would think Israel, you need to think less about destroying Hamas, right, if that is possible, and more about what message you are sending to Palestinians. And the message you need to send to Palestinians is that that there is a path to get for them to get freedom. And right now we're sending the opposite. We basically shut every time when Palestinians are resisting non-violently, you shut that down. When they try to boycott, when they go to national for justice, anything we do, basically, we shut that down. And that ultimately makes you arrested. So that's what I would say to women. So that's what I say to women. Again, I don't think we can listen to that. I don't know about that.
So I don't really have to necessarily jump back and forth, that's all, but I feel like I'm a leader. And I feel like the people for decades now, the governments of Israel, have been committed to the Netflix state.
Yeah.
And some of the things that you support,
Yeah.
for example, the right of return.
Yeah.
It seems to be the exact opposite of what the Israeli government is trying to accomplish. Meaning, I think everybody who's happening about it, what they're trying is displace, 2.3 million Palestinians so that they will never return, right? And what they're hoping for is something like Jordan, where they go to Jordan, they prosper, and get citizenship. And it's just not what they're fighting, right? And what they're hoping to avoid is like what's happening in Lebanon, where they're in Lebanon, but they're refugee camps. They don't have citizenship, they don't have it. And those people are waiting to come back. And they're not happy, right? So how realistic? I mean, let's be honest. I don't believe it's realistic that we're going to get the Israeli government and the Israeli people to ever support a one-state solution, right? So if you can tell us from your interactions with your community, right, what kind of support do you find?
I think so. The discourse in the United States among Jews in the United States is very different from the discourse in Israel, especially among young people, where you see this really big divide. Because the thing about American Jews is that most American Jews believe really deeply in the principle of equality of the law here. Like, we believe that that's what keeps us safe. And so it's not that much belief, especially for younger progressive Jews, to think that that would be right. I agree. There are very few Israeli Jews who support that. There are a lot of Palestinians in Israel, but not all. So I can't, maybe I'm utopian. I can't draw, I know what policy I want the U.S. government to do now. I want the U.S. to stop funding sending records to war. I want America to stop providing impunity for Israel in international forums like the International Court and the International Court of Justice and the UN. I can't tell you how we get from here to there. And part of the problem is we don't really entirely know what I think the Palestinian national movement wants, whether it wants one or two states, because the PLO's initial view was what they call a separate democratic Palestine, and then in 1988 it shifted towards embracing partition. But the PLO is not really, as I understand, really functioning now, and Mahmoud Abbas doesn't have any credibility. So it's not so clear to me like what the Palestinian call is in terms of one or two states. But I would just say, maybe utopian, if you had asked white South Africans, the apartheid ended in 1994, so I had this question 10 years before that, even 5 years in the late 1980s, most white South Africans would have thought the idea that apartheid would end and Nelson Mandela, the president, would be just completely absurd, right? And if you would talk to most Americans in the 1940s, maybe even into 1950s, and you said, in a few years, in a generation, we're going to have a military where white soldiers are taking orders from black cops, they would have said, that's impossible, right? So great movements, the kind of like anti-apartheid movement, the civil rights movement, can change things in really profound ways. And I really do believe that if there was a movement that could put enough pressure on Israel, a movement that, again, in the tradition of the movement of what Mandela did, because the thing about Mandela was being, I think, so powerful was he was absolutely a hard line, complete hard line on the position of equality. He would not compromise on an absolute principle of equality. But he also had a message, like Martin King did, a message of reconciliation and love, which is essentially once we gain our full freedom, we will embrace you. And I think such a movement could potentially change the world enough to put enough pressure on Israel that some Israeli Jews might start to say, it's a better path for us to accept the principle of equality, as WhatsApp started to do in the early 1990s. So that's my hope.
I want to go back and clean up something you said earlier and make sure I'm on the same page. And that is, you would agree that the justification that we're being given today, that justifies perhaps the largest humanitarian crisis. What you have defined as genocide. The justification for that today, it's given by Israel, is we have to exterminate Hamas. You would agree with me that that's something.
I don't know how to use the word subterfuge. I mean, I think that a lot of Israeli Jews genuinely believe that that's what this war is about, and that's why they're fighting. What I would say to them is that this is not a just war, because it's not a just war for a number of reasons. First of all, it stopped being a just war the day Israel cut off food, fuel, and water between Palestine and Gaza, which happened almost immediately. Secondly, Israel was not attacked by a sovereign country. It was attacked by a population that is under occupation. So it's not the equivalent of America being attacked by Mexico, or even the United States being attacked on 9/11. You're talking about basically a cat being attacked by a group that's basically operating from within what human rights watch called Americanism, right? And I would also say that I don't think it's possible to destroy the United States. You could basically depose Hamas from running the island. But I would say that there's no reason to believe that that would make Israel any safer, right? Because ultimately, Israeli and Palestinian safety is intertwined. So it doesn't matter whether it's Hamas or some other organization. If Palestinians aren't safe, Israeli Jews, I think, belong to them not safe. And I think Palestinians will never be safe until Palestinians are safe. So that's my basic view. But I will also believe, as I said, that what I think Hamas did on 27 is wrong. I think to target civilians in war is wrong, period. And what Hamas did on 27 was, in addition to killing a lot of soldiers, it also clearly killed and targeted civilians, and that to me is a violation of international law, and I think it's immoral. It doesn't justify this war, but I think it's important for some people I believe in sanctity of all life to say that.
I want to ask this sincere question because I'm not familiar with the area outside of Gaza. So, but maybe you can clear it up for me. And I want to ask you a question. I struggle with calling it a war. I don't think it was a war. There was an attack that from an occupied people who've been under siege for 17 years. And we can agree on parts or even all of the sort of classification of that as unjust attack. Whether we agree or not, the response that's happened over the next 6 months is not war, it's going to be one part. I mean, that's how I classify it. And I'd like to, the next part of the meeting, you respond to that as well as sort of at least in the West Bank, I know that are armed and engaged in attacks on Palestinian communities. I'm not familiar with the settlements near Gaza, but as I understand, many of those settlements were previously part of, they were Palestinian homes, and people that are in Gaza and did those homes, those are settlers who put it and are armed, sort of like a wing of the military. At least I've heard sort of classify those people that were basically sort of part of it. How do you respond?
So, I mean, first of all, it's important, we should start by acknowledging that some of the people that were killed on 27, Hamas killed, or came out of Gaza killed, were child workers, other foreign workers, and some Palestinian citizens of Israel, right? So those people certainly were not armed and connected to the Israeli military in any way. These were these kibbutz and those towns. I mean, who are close to Gaza, they're not really particularly any different than any other town or kibbutz, which is kind of an agricultural community in Israel, which means that Israel has military conscription. So all Jewish Israelis, I mean not all, but most Jewish Israelis will serve in the military, and then will do, you know, 17 or whatever, and they'll do reserve duty until they're probably in the 40s or whatever. So, you know, like there's the National Guard, you know. And so, yes, some of those people might at some point have weapons. But I think, to me, to suggest that they're not civilians is, to me, wrong. I think they, to me, in my mind, I'm not an expert, but in my mind, they are civilians. I mean, an American who is armed is still a civilian. Even an American who's in the National Guard, that is kind of off duty, just doing a job as a fireman or a teacher or whatever, is still in that moment a civilian. They don't have a uniform on, they're not involved in combat. So I don't really, so to me, you know, I just think that I think that Palestinians have resisted their dispossession in many ways. There have been huge general strikes, there have been huge mass protests, there have been huge boycotts, there have been hunger strikes, there have been a whole range of efforts. And there have been armed resistance, and there's armed resistance against soldiers, military parties, and armed resistance against civilians. And my view, and this is not particularly Palestinians, it's for any group of people, whether it was when the IRA was fighting against against the fact that Catholics were basically being oppressed in Northern Ireland. I thought Catholics in the IRA had every right to fight against that. But when they blew up bombs in front of department stores in London, I thought they were wrong. So that's the principle that got my view on this.
So we can't talk about decision without talking about America's position on America's role in this conflict. And it seems to me that I would personally define this. You know, that's the way I think my country's politics is. We have things that we can leverage with our relationship with Israel, don't we?
Yes.
Okay. Can we talk about what that is?
Sure, absolutely. So first of all, as I mentioned, America goes to $3.8 billion in military aid a year. And in addition to that kind of annual amount, we've been giving Israel supplemental more money since during this war or this whatever we're going to call it. And I think that's wrong. I don't think the U.S. should be giving weapons in this. Again, I'm going to call it a war, but I understand if someone wants to call it something different. Which is destroying. You know, a war which has destroyed every single one of Gaza's universities, has destroyed most of its hospitals, has killed hundreds of journalists, has basically forced, I think it's led to 90% of people being forced out of their homes. It has damaged 70% of the homes in Gaza. I read this unbelievable statistic from the UN recently, which said that if the war were to end tomorrow, and Gaza were to return to the growth rate that it had on October 7th, that Gaza would regain its GDP. Remember, Gaza wasn't doing well before this, right? They had already been declared unlivable by the UN before this. But this UN estimate was it would not return to its GDP that it had on October 7th until 2092. It's almost 70 years. I mean, it's just unfathomable. And so, no, I don't believe the U.S. should have supplied weapons for this. And I don't believe that the United States should be blocking the court of the course of international justice. I believe in international law, and just as I want the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice to hold Vladimir Putin responsible for what he did in Ukraine, I want them to hold every country. I want them to hold the United States for that responsible for what we do in our wars, and I want also Israel to be held responsible. And the U.S. shouldn't stand in the way of that. So yeah, I think we have a lot of things in play. It's just that the U.S. hasn't been able to. I think the Biden administration has had a perception of politics, and maybe Joe Biden also just doesn't have the same. I don't know how much of it is his perception of politics and how much of it is just him personally, that he doesn't, for all his famous empathy, he doesn't just really seem to empathize with Palestinians very much, which is a terrible thing. But for whatever reason, I just think they were locked into a certain idea about how America should be Israel. It was wrong before October 7th. It was wrong before this war, but is now just so radically at odds with basic principles of how the U.S. should conduct itself around the world. That it's been horrible. And the thing is, you know, the consolation is that a lot of Americans around the world have been organizing and have managed to start putting pressure inside the Democratic Party. So, for instance, this position of conditioning military aid. Before this war, the number of members of Congress who supported conditioning military aid was 9. We were talking about basically like a squad and Bernie Sanders. And now we're seeing a significant number of Democrats are embracing this position. It's so awful that it took this for that to happen because it was the right position to hold before this. But it is because of people's organizing we started to see the shift in the Democratic Party. And I don't think the next Democratic president will pursue the kind of policy.
So we had a private conversation before we got here about U.S. politics. I'm probably not really paying something to TikTok, but I posted my view very clearly that Biden lost my support many months ago. And anyone who knows me from 2017, 2021 knows how much I absolutely publicly despise the president in those years. And so for people who care about that stuff, people who care deeply about human life, about, say, as a lawyer, I always get up to the jury and say, I want to send a message to defend the corporation who's harmed either my client or the public. So you have to send a message to this corporation. So how do we, in your view, I have my views on how you send a message to the Democratic Party, because I don't think we have a shot in hell of getting the Republican Party to ever support a real viable Palestinian state or a one-state solution. But how do we send a message? And what do you think the message is in November, Joe Biden, president, who wins this election, despite all of this horror that we've been watching? I will say, I choose the genocide.
Okay. The two words are not actually, they're not mutually exclusive, right? I mean, the International Court of Justice said that this is also the genocide. I think I take your point that it's possible that, first of all, I understand that there are many people watching what Joe Biden has done, which is mean that God, they I also understand this, you're talking about that it would send the message that his policies were okay. I'm actually more optimistic that given the shift that are taking place in the Democratic Party, that Joe Biden's policies, which have already started to change, I mean, horrifically late, right? It's up to 6 months. But there's a pressure inside the Democratic Party that is starting to move even him, right? Because he clearly said something to Benjamin Netanyahu in the last conversation that he never said to Benjamin Netanyahu before, because all of a sudden Israel actually started opening some crossings, and not the first time anywhere near that. And they seem to be pushing. He did seem to put the pressure on conditioning military on the table. And so when I think about Biden versus Trump, just on this issue, on the question of Israel and Palestine, I think Trump will be worse. Not worse than Biden was, in the first months, but I think worse than Biden will be going forward, because Biden is now getting pressure inside the Democratic Party by a lot of people in Congress and by a lot of people in the base to do things that are actually going to end unconditional U.S. support. And I don't think Donald Trump is going to face that pressure inside the Republican Party because there is not much of a constituency inside the Republican Party for that. There's nobody in Congress that's been pushing him in the way that we now have people like Chris Van Hollen and others who are basically pushing on it. So that's one reason that I think that I'm more inclined to vote for Biden than you are. The other reason is that I just worry that after 4 years of Donald Trump, I just don't know how free the election in 2028 will be. I just don't know. Once Trump has had 4 more years to basically try to kind of basically sabotage what are already pretty dysfunctional American system of elections and democracy, that he might not decide he wants to stay there, and that he might not have enough vacuums in various different places in the states and the Congress that we could be in some kind of real crisis in the Supreme Court. He gets another seat or two in the Supreme Court. So again, this is my personal view. I would not go out to certain, I totally respect the opinion of people who just say, after this, no way. But I think about it.
Yeah, I have one question, and I'm going to turn it over. Who has the microphone? Let me ask this question. Just to go back to American policies real quick. So, for those of you who don't know, 38 states have enacted anti-BDS statute, anti-boycott, domestic and sanctions. 38, so the majority of states. Which basically means that if you contract with the state of Arizona, for example, we have one of those, or any of its municipalities, including if you're a public defender and you contract to take cases, you cannot boycott against the state of Israel or they can pull your contract, which to me is absurdity from that, because we have this thing called the First Amendment, which is first, and I am American first, and I believe in our Constitution first. How do we get there?
I mean, I think that I think what happened is that supporters of Israel and the United States began to see the BDS movement as a threat, because I think it actually is potentially a very potent threat, because there is a long tradition of boycotts in the United States. Boycotts get things done. Boycotts get things done. It is because you can't call it terrorism. I mean, you could, but it's insane, right? It's a non-violent tactic. You can't say it's, Islamist fundamentalism. It's basically a movement that's talking about human rights and international law. It's modeled on the anti-apartheid movement, which was very effective. And so I think there was an effort then to basically try to shut this down by basically going to state. And I agree. I think it's a profound assault on free speech. And it's also become, a template for other people who also want to say, oh, you know what? You also can't go to work in the state of Arizona if you want to boycott fossil fuel companies. So like once you open the door as this mechanism, there are a lot of people that, a lot of people would like to basically shut down boycotts against them, right? And so I think it's unfortunately it seems like a lot of these state legislations just copied and pasted this legislation. They got it from some group, some right-wing group, and I think it's terrible. And I think that we have to say it's terrible. It's fundamentally wrong to violate free speech. And it's also fundamentally wrong because you can't, on the one hand, tell Palestinians that they need to find market aims and they need to be nonviolent if you shut down their efforts on nonviolence. It's just not morally consistent, right? Again, I have no problem, as I said, I don't believe in violence against civilians. And it's precisely because I don't believe in violence against civilians that I feel it is incumbent on me to make an extra effort to support nonviolent resistance, to show people that that can work. But in fact, what the U.S. government does is exactly the opposite.
So, Andrew, I don't know if you got questions already, and then put it to the audience.
Okay, are you sure?
Hello, my name is Mike Sakati. I'm a faculty member in the College for Solutions at ASU, but still a refugee from Lebanon for coming from this country. So thank you so much today for the talk, for the questions, for the beautiful discussion that we heard. I do a lot of research in ability to help, and I strongly believe as a health researcher in targeting the cause of the problem, not dealing with the symptoms, as our medical system here in the US always works on the symptoms, not the causes. So the root cause of the Palestinian situation over 72 years is the settler colonialists that took over the land and has been really doing over decades a lot of injustice, a lot of killing, a lot of crimes. So I'm proposing this scenario. What if we revert the problem or the situation by letting the Palestinians take over and treat equally the Israelis living there? And I'm not going to say let them go back where they came from, Europe or Africa, Asia, whatever. Let them stay there, but let the Palestinians take over the country and build a system, a constitution that is based on equality for everyone under their government. Is that possible or not?
Well, I do believe in the principle of full equality and also the historical justice. I think the only difference, perhaps, even in the way we frame it, is I would not say let Palestinians build, but I would say let all people build, because the principle of equality is that once people have equality, all people are equally governed, right? So all people have the right to vote and build this new society equally, just as white South Africans were equal partners in building post-apartheid South Africa. I think Israeli Jews have to be equal partners, not superior partners, but equal partners. You know, settler colonialism, as you know, can play itself out in many different ways, right? We know how it played itself out tragically and horrifically in this country, right? What happened in this country is that the native population was so destroyed, right, that it was basically reduced to being a shadow of what it was, right? And that's also the case in Australia, in Canada. I think the most hopeful vision we have of a settler colony is South Africa, in which it has a long window, but to use the phrase of Mahmoud Mamdani, in that vision, the settler becomes native. That distinction, those historical injustices over time, with equality and also with recognition of what happened, with facing the past, and making and having, this is why Tanasi goes to American talks about reparations, it's about basically facing the past and beginning to make amends for recognizing that you never return back to and face it, and you can begin to try to work towards historical justice. And then those ancient, those crimes and those things can start a new identity in society can start to come. And so I think we're obviously very, very, very far away from that, but that's the world that I would live in.
Hi, my name is Sandra. I'm the editor of Jewish News, which is our home Jewish newspaper. And my question is actually something you referred to just briefly. After October 7th, a lot of the Jewish legacy organizations that have wanted, especially the Information Life and Henry Black, who was also here a couple of months ago, kind of pulled the trigger for the expression, but to say anti-Semitism or anti-Semitism really is anti-Semitism.
Yes.
Now that's been picked up by a lot of the big Jewish organizations, and for example, in our Arizona State House, we had a joint session of the legislature last week, and the Israeli General Counsel was here to speak to them. He said it, and he actually said that October 7th wasn't happening, it was about hatred of Jews. So as the more the fact gets used and repeated, and then Jews in the United States, like the numbers that are talked about, where do you see that going? Like, do you see that changing in the near future? Do you see any evidence that there are individuals in those agencies who are pushing back against that? Do you see anything else on the horizon for to be a place where the mainstream Jewish organizations get there?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, even before October 7th, they were making these arguments, and now they're making them more, more emphatically. I think to equate anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism is just fundamentally wrong. Totally right? So first of all, there's always been Jews who are anti-Zionist, right? You can start with most Haredi or also Orthodox were anti-Zionists. The stock market citizens were the largest city in America are anti-Zionist, right? They believe that the persecution vote in the Talmud basically prohibits the creation of the Jewish state before the coming of the Messiah. So, good luck to those who thought already, and some of these anti-Semitic. It's also the case that there are a lot of progressive Americans, especially young Americans, who don't support Zionism because they don't support the principle of ethnic nationalism. They believe in the principle of equality and law. It was a 2021 poll by the Jewish Electoral Institute, which found that 38% of Americans who went to the age of 40 think Israel's an apartheid. Right? Are you really going to say that almost 40% of young American Jews are anti-Semitic? It's ridiculous, right? You're literally calling your own children anti-Semitic. It makes no sense, right? It's intellectually and morally perverse to say that if you believe in the principle that people should be treated equal, it's totally perverse to say that represents bigotry. It's the opposite of bigotry. It's the principle that people should be treated equal, right? And if you say that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, you are saying that all Palestinians are bigoted. Because you're going to really have a hard time finding a Palestinian who's not anti-Zionist, right? Because even if you believe that the creation of the state of Israel is the best thing that's ever constitution, it's not been a good thing, right? It's just not, right? It starts with their expulsion in 1948 and goes downhill. So if you say anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, what you're saying is that all Palestinians, and that is profoundly dehumanizing, right? And it's not only dehumanizing, it sets the basis for that if they're bigoted, well then they should be silenced and even be criminalized, right? As PBS was. It's fundamentally wrong. If you want to, and it's tragic to me that organizations like the ADR are coming down. And I think they're doing it because they don't want to actually have an argument in which they actually defend what the Israeli government is doing and what its government ideology is. Because it's very difficult to defend. So what they want to do is basically just kind of shut down all of these people. And a lot of the people they shut down these are Palestinians, and some of them are Jews. I mean, the irony is that when they suspended Jewish Voice for Peace at Columbia, I think that the email said, "Thank Columbia for protecting the safety of Jewish people." They had just shut down a Jewish organization. Right? This is how perverse. I mean, they also started trying to suspend Jews all to the justice Gaza. This shows how perverse and frankly how out of touch these organizations are with where many young American Jews are.
My name is Nasir Wal. I'm a Pakistani American, and since October, I've been protesting Palestinian to their forms every day at street corners and rallies and protests. Islamic, secularists, atheists, older, all sorts of people, very particularly women, Palestinian women, others, Jewish, the whole radio that we have in the United States against the genocide. So my question is, we blame Israel. We have a problem with where Israelis are today, Israeli Jews are today on future.
and how they might turn around. And you are hopeful, I'm hopeful. I went to Boston and I saw people getting together, from that wall. So they sat on the same table. So here in Arizona, we have 5, 6, 7 different Palestinian organizations on different, some have Islamic slogans, some have secular slogans, some have Christian slogans. How do we get all the Palestinian factions to unite on a program, a future program that will provide the state that you and I envision with equal rights for Jews, Muslims who support Hamas or or whoever else? How do we get about doing that when we are here right now? How do we get the PLO and the people and others who are sincere enough to be bought by the Israeli government? How do we unite all of them? And on what slogan should it be? Secular nationalism and justice? What slogans and how do we go about this? Sorry for this so such a long explanation.
I wish I knew the answer to that. I don't really honestly feel like I'm in the best position to answer that. I'm not an expert on Palestinian politics. I know what I believe, which is the idea of equality under the law. But I think that I read, I know it seems to me from what I read, it's very important to rebuild the PLO as a functioning institution because the PLO was the umbrella for different Palestinian groups and to kind of create a forum in which Palestinians, whether they were in West Bank or in refugee camps around the world, could kind of coalesce around a national strategy. I'm not the best person to know how you would do that. I've heard people. One person who I really deeply admire, a guy named Tariq Iran, who's based in the West Bank, made the point to me in a conversation we had that some of the people who would be best equipped to do this are Palestinian prisoners, because Palestinian prisoners have a history of working together across the party line, and so many Palestinians are in prison, and so many of the Palestinian leaders are in prison. That if some of those people were to be let out of prison, they could be the nucleus for rebuilding this kind of politics that could allow Palestinians to think together about what their vision is, but I don't have the expertise to really know how that would work beyond that.
Hello, my name is Ted, and I'm a student at the Student Sociology major, so definitely one of the small people in this room. And I have a question that the more experience is actual. So basically, my question is, in light of what this one is over 6 months of genocide and a lack strong international response to it, I noticed that you were noticing the Asian and tone on that administration across the people. And my question is, in spite of this failure to respond to the genocide effort, why should we still trust many of these liberal and democratic institutions? Why should we still trust the Democratic? Why should we still trust the United Nations or the International Court of Justice League, even that they do not acknowledge the humanity of Palestinians or indigenous peoples for that matter?
I don't think I would say it's going to trust these institutions, not at all. I think the question is, can you, through pressure and organizing and building up a political power, change those institutions? Never to make them ideals in any way, but to make them have to respond, right? And I think about the movement against the war in Vietnam, right? This was a problem, like the war, like what we see in Gaza. The war in Vietnam was prosecuted by Democratic presidents, right? John Kennedy and then especially Lyndon Johnson, right? Johnson was very, very committed to the war, and millions of Vietnamese were killed. But over time, a movement grew up in the United States that changed the Democratic Party. And by 1972, they had nominated George government, who was the most anti-war nominee the Democratic Party ever nominated. He didn't do very well in the election, but he was really genuinely opposed to genuinely have very different visions of that. So to me, it seems to be the civil rights movement changed the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party was a segregationist party. Most of the God segregation from Democrats. The civil rights movement changed the Democratic Party to the point where a Democrat from Texas, signed the voting rights and civil rights. So it seems to me that's what I would hope it was possible to change the institution through pressure and organizing, and doing things like voting uncommitted in these primaries that people are doing. And it's not nearly enough. And it's come way, way, way too late and at a cost that we can't even fathom. But we can see that even Joe Biden, and Joe Biden is, I think, one of the last Democrats in Congress to start to see this, that even Joe Biden and his advisors are starting to see that they have to respond to this.
I want to circle back on a couple of things that you said. One of the things was about October 7th. The other one was from the river to the sea. So when I say from the river to the sea, I don't say Palestinians will be free. I say Palestine will be free. Because all of Palestine is occupied. There was no Israel. That's all Palestinian territory. So yes, I mean when they say that. And my background is I am Moroccan and Algerian, and I'm sure you know the history. 132 years of occupation, 1.5 million people killed by the French, slaughtered, both my Moroccan and my Algerian side. All of my grandmother's brothers killed by the French, and to the West, they would be considered terrorists. And I'm proud that they were heroes because of that, we have our country today. And the only reason that Algeria and Morocco and Tunisia, the only reason we gained our independence is because every single French person left Algeria. Because it's very apparent that the Israelis have no intention of living in peace. They do not want to play nice, they do not want to share, and they will never allow Palestinians to rule or to govern or even to have enough. They control their caloric intake, not even to have enough food or water to survive. And we've given them 75 years, and they've proven that they're not there to play nice. So yes, my stance is they all need to go back to where they came from. Morocco, Poland, Germany, wherever the hell they came from. So my question to you is, when is enough? You mentioned October 7th multiple times, and you said, well, they killed some civilians. When do we have permission to fight back? What's fair game to you as an American Jew for Palestinians to be able to get their dignity, their self-respect, and their country back? What is okay for them to retaliate and fight back? What does the resistance, what are they able to do that's okay with your text?
Yeah, I think we have a fundamental disagreement because I believe that all human life is precious, all human life. And that sure as hell goes to my own people, Jews. I believe that Palestinians have the right, the Palestinians have many, many different opportunities to resist, and that there is a fundamental difference between resistance that respects the sanctity of all human life and resistance that doesn't. Nelson Mandela was in prison for 27 years under apartheid. And the ANC, the African National Congress, which practiced armed resistance, it was not a nonviolent movement, it practiced armed resistance, made a conscious decision, despite the hell and the horror of South African apartheid, not to target civilians. And I think that is part of the reason that apartheid ended in the way it did. So yes, I think that the idea of an Algeria solution is fantasy in Israel-Palestine. Jews are not the French in Algeria. When I get up in the morning and I pray towards Jerusalem, and I pray for a return to Jerusalem. This land is deep, deep within us. We are not the French in Algeria. Now that does not mean that we have the right to one iota of privilege or supremacy over Palestinians. We don't. Not one iota of privilege. But Israeli Jews are not going to be forced to go back to Morocco or Poland or anyone else by armed resistance. In fact, killing a lot of civilians is going to actually make it less likely that we get to the day when Palestinians have what they deserve, which is full freedom and full equality and historical justice. So you and I just profoundly disagree on this. Sorry, I think they have a right to apply to whoever they want. I do. I actually have written. I've actually written quite a lot of length about Palestinian refugee return, which I support. Right. The truth is that there are actually tragically very, very few original Palestinian homes that remain. I wrote in that piece about the vision that Palestinians and others in groups like Zafro have written about what to do in those rare circumstances where there are specific homes that are still remaining. Tragically, there are very few specific homes that are remaining. What I believe is that all Palestinians who are refugees and their descendants, because refugee status continues on, not just for Palestinians but for other refugee populations, have the right to return to the places from which they came. Whether that's Jaffa or Haifa or Spa or the Galilee or Jerusalem or Lod or Rome or anywhere else, that they should be allowed to return. And then provisions need to be made for them to be able to that housing has to be built for them. There have to be provisions for them to have jobs. I believe in the right of Palestinian refugees to return. I do not believe in the expulsion of Israelis.
And I think it's important to know that people in this room, at least most of the people in this room, most people who care about humanity, human lives, in Palestinian lives, would you survive on as an ally? You don't have to agree, and I don't necessarily agree with everything he says and every position he's taken on how to advance the Palestinian cause. But I genuinely believe that he is a well-intentioned person who is advocating for Palestinian human rights. And so when I say to all of my Palestinian friends who attack Sean King, for example, for speaking out and saying you're not Palestinian, shut up. First of all, the civil rights movement didn't become what it was without white people saying, well, what our people are doing is wrong and we fight against it. And without Jewish voices, not just Jewish voices for peace, but all Jewish voices speaking out against what's happening to Palestinian people, we are further apart and further away from the day where Palestinians have equal rights. Whether you believe to be in Palestine, you want to call it Palestine, you want to call it Israel, Palestine, you want to call it Israel. At the end of the day, I think we all strive for peace, security, to raise our children, to give them a future. And so if we can get there, I'm willing to get to this point, I'm willing to take it anywhere we can get it. So this is obviously, as you know, you're really people are passionate and get heated about this because of, especially the last 6 months.
Yes. No, and I really appreciate people who come and listen to me if they don't agree. I mean, I think it says it's really admirable when you hear someone you disagree with. I don't expect that everyone's necessarily going to do everything I say. So if you disagree with things that I say, I really appreciate you being willing to listen to something that you don't entirely agree with. That's a good model for all of us.
Hello. I believe you're very genuine in what you're saying, but the thing is, I think what she's trying to get at is Israelis that are in Israel. They're so hard-minded, and especially the government right now, I have to say that. How the hell are you going to educate all these people that don't wait for peace in their future, for peace for us and our future, and to give us the dignity that we deserve, and to make it an even level playing field. And a lot of people say October 7th. Well, from October 1st, from January 1st to October 6th of 2023, we had October 7th every day. Palestinians that were getting killed in the West Bank every day. I think up to about 250 people and about 40 women children. So October 7th was October every day for us. It's been every single day. So it's not obviously. Yeah. Look, what we're trying to say is we need to educate the Israelis and try to tell them, hey, you need to start seeing the big picture. Otherwise, your kid is going to be a martyr. Your kid, because he's going to live in an Israeli Jewish school, whatever, and one day somebody's, God willing, no, somebody's going to maybe bomb them, and they'll be dead.
Yeah.
So, it's going to be a temp for as long as we live.
You may be right. I pray that that's not. I mean, first of all, because as I said, I fundamentally believe in the family and precious of life. And secondly, because I don't think that's going to work. I think that what is more likely to create a profound change that we need to see, and I agree, it's almost unimaginable today. But we have other examples where, think about what white Americans were like in Mississippi in the 1950s, right? What that society was like, how brutal it was, how completely unresistant it was to any possibility of change, right? I think I agree. I think you do it with unrelenting but loving pressure. Pressure is unrelenting in the way that the civil rights movement was unrelenting, in the way that the INC was unrelenting, in terms of the pressure, because as President Douglas said, power concedes nothing without demand. People don't just wake up and change their mind because they feel like it. There has to be pressure that makes people realize that the status quo is no longer possible. But I think it also has to be combined with a vision of a future in which people can see themselves and allow space for them to be part of that society, and as long as they're willing to recognize that they are no better than anybody else, and that they have to accept equality. No superiority, and I think that is to me the message of the civil rights movement and the message of the anti-rights movement. Will it work? I don't know, but I don't think that killing more than Israeli civilians is going to work. I think it's going to definitely be less effective in terms of creating political change. I think tragically, I agree. Tragically, I think. Yes. I agree. Like I said, I believe that Palestinian safety and Israeli Jewish safety are different. Well, we have to. What many of you have been doing is creating the movement that creates the pressure. And I know it's still far away, but just think how this movement is so much stronger and big than it was even just 6 months ago. There's so many people who didn't know or not connected to these issues. So many young people, especially older who now feel like it's central to their political identity and their sense of what's right and wrong to care about Palestinian freedom. Something is happening in the United States, and I think around the world. And so again, obviously that doesn't make up for the just unspeakable devastation of what's happened. But I think this has, to me, many of the makings of what the great 20th century moral movement, which it can bring together people from every background around the basic set of principles that people who have been abused and oppressed deserve to be free.
You agree, I guess, in response that the Israelis and the people people suffering in the occupied territory are gonna have a hell of a lot harder time to mend those fences, but that people here, and especially since the U.S. is the big brother, the Billy Stick, the whatever you want to call them, they are the hammer that allows these really hardliners to do what they're doing. So you agree with me that it's really our responsibility here in this country to take away that leverage from those hardliners, to change our politics so that the people in Israel will actually see that they don't have a choice, but
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons Benjamin Netanyahu has been in power so long is they always told Israeli Jews, Israelis, they can have a community too. They can basically do whatever they want to Palestinians, and there will be no repercussions. We wouldn't undermine Israel's relations with the United States. We wouldn't undermine Israel's relations with Europe. And the relations with Europe is very important economically. And he was proven right. Is the American president proven right that he could do whatever he wanted, and he didn't undermine. In fact, Israel felt like he was becoming gaining more standing afterwards, normalizing relations with the UAE and Bahrain, et cetera, et cetera. And so, yeah, America has to prove him wrong. Now, I'm not saying that either the Pete and Bennett are any, they're not that different, truthfully, than Netanyahu. It's not like they're offering any fundamental vision. But I do believe that if more Israeli Jews come to the realization that Israel is becoming isolated in the world because of its behavior, it can create an opportunity for different kind of conversation.
And just the question was how, right? The question was how. I think here we have a responsibility to be politically active here. And to your point, we have seen a tremendous shift. And so I'm fortunate that it's taken what it's taken
Absolutely.
to do that. Absolutely. And we all regret that we weren't louder and spending our money and donating and doing those kinds of things and having that. But the political, who are leaders of this, and every time I look at the chair, I think of Donald Trump. So I see you now in the orange shirt. He's like, he was an enabler, and in my opinion, and it was not going after you about what they had TV torture people. And if we can prevent those things from happening, I think there could be a equalization. It's the question of how. I mean, that's the gradual thing, but that's one of the things.
yeah. I thank you all for extremely wonderful points. I agree with David that respect and encourage everybody to join our class. But I do read a lot about what you write and what you do, and I do have a lot of the works that you still hold on to very strongly. Zionism. Like imagine somebody saying, I'm a baby in the white supremacy. I'll tell you it's a little watered down than the holy ones, but you should accept it. I think we really should think about some of those. You call Palestinians and Jewish people should get along. Palestinians are Jewish too. So Zionists do not own the word Judaism or Jews, right? Another point you just strongly defended that it's different than French by saying, oh no, I pray Jerusalem. Doesn't mean all Catholics should invade Rome. So let's use better words, and I think it'll still help in something. And I think until we break away from that feeling, we need to talk about it.
I appreciate what you're saying. I think the relationship of Jews to the land of Israel is not the same as the relationship of Catholics to the Vatican. At the center of Judaism as a religion is this land, right? Again, I don't believe that gives Jews any right to any legal supremacy. I don't support the Jewish state, but it's a fundamentally different relationship than Catholics have with that. There were Jewish Palestinians. What has happened certainly since the Grecian times, and certainly since 1948, right, is that there are not really Jewish Palestinians anymore. And maybe one day there will be Jewish Palestinians again. That Palestinian will be a term It is encompassing again of people of Jews as well as Christians and Muslims, but we're not at that moment now. Right? What we are now at a moment where there's very, very strong great Jewish identity. It is seen as mutually exclusive with Palestine. That's where we are now. Again, if I believe that calling myself a cultural Zionist meant that I supported a kind of watered down version of Jewish supremacy, I would not call myself. But for me, it means that I support no Jewish supremacy. I believe in full equality under the law, and I believe in the principle also of historical justice for Palestine.
What it is that we now, especially the last 6 years, we always get extremely
Okay, I understand.
So you're going to say at the very beginning, right? I say word, I said something very similar, words matter.
Yeah.
Peter and I,
Yeah.
I'm going to call you on that because if you were able to say the call part that you want,
Right.
Yeah, that's different.
Yeah.
Especially in the last 6 months. And so I get it,
Yeah.
and I also understand how someone with background might think, but I want to get it. I want to give it a real meaning, what Peter believes Zionism is something different. He's trying to play back.
I totally appreciate and understand your perspective. I hear you.
I have a question. Thanks so much for the presentation. It was really dynamic and enriching. So I have an observation and I'm screening with a question. The first observation is there's a immediate sort of inclination to always label and a label that is terrorist. And there's no sort of dry, also labeling, justifiably label what the state of Israel has done as state-sponsored terrorism. And the reason that is because of the racial and religious identity of both entities. Whenever it's a crime or a misdemeanor engagement in any form of violence, we instantly call it terrorism. However, there's a juxtaposition and a disavowal to use that same label as a white and Jewish or Christian entity doing the same thing. So I want to be very firm and emphatic in saying that whether you call it war or genocide or ethnic cleansing, you always lead with the observation that what's happening right now in real time is state-sponsored terrorism, regardless of what the racial religious identity of the state is. That's the first thing. The second thing is, and this is a question that I have, and a question that, to be frank with you, is very taboo as a consequence of the way in which suppression of any critique of Israel has sort of been conflated with anti-Semitism in real time right now is, how is the state-sponsored terrorism of the Netanyahu regime, which in many respects is being driven by a religiously zealot wing that drives this regime, inciting and exacerbating really legitimate, bona fide anti-Semitism, not only in this country, but on a global scale?
Thank you. I appreciate both of those. So first of all, I just avoid the term terrorism altogether because it has been so, as you say, it's such a racialized term that what I talk about is the killing of civilians. I think I used the term Islamist, not the term terrorist, right? I mean, Islamist, we get Islamist means that you basically believe in the idea of a state that in some way is informed by Islamic principles, whatever that means, right? But I don't use the term terrorist. I basically refer to the killing of civilians or the targeting of civilians, right? Because I think Allah gave you what I'm saying. And I also think, Israel has destroyed all of the universities. Israel, most of the people that Israel has killed are civilians, right? Most of them are women and children. I think that I saw statistics that in the Ukraine war, in 2 years, there have been something like 550 children killed. And Ukraine has a population of 40 million people. In Gaza, we have a population of 2 million people. In 6 months, 13,000 children have been killed. And these numbers are probably higher because we have people who are still under rubble. I mean, people not even going to be taken to be more to be counted. In terms of the question of anti-Semitism, yes, there are people who take out their anger at what Israel is doing and what Netanyahu is doing against Jews. And that's wrong, because Jews are not responsible for what Israel is doing any more than a Chinese American person is responsible for what the people of China is doing, or any or a Russian person in America is responsible for what Vladimir Putin, right? So it's really important to make a clear distinction. Seems to be Israel is a state. Jews are a religion and ethnicity. Some Jews may support that state, and then you have the right to criticize them for that support, just like you would criticize a Christian person who is supporting that state. But I think we need to be really clear about this distinction. Unfortunately, sometimes the American Jewish organizations are themselves not clear about that distinction, right? They don't want to say that supporting Israel is a choice that Jewish people can make or not make. Sometimes they say that supporting Israel is inherent in being Jewish. That's very problematic, right? Because you're actually then you're making the very conflation that we don't want to make, right? And so I think that's one of the things I say to Jewish audience is very, very clear, right? Is we have to be really clear about the distinction. We want other people to be clear about the distinction, but we have to be clear about the distinction. But a lot of the, unfortunately, the established Jewish organizations don't want to say that. They want to say the opposite.
Right? This is so there's a lot of language adopting that is radicalized terrorism or radicalized. My question is not distinction. My question is regarding the vulnerability of this engaging inciting terrorism. What is the vulnerability?
I believe that look, the statistics show very clearly. There are actually 3 academic studies on it. That there's one in the U.S., one in Belgium, and one in Australia. That in weeks where Israel kills more Palestinians, the number of reported anti-Semitism. So there's a clear correlation between what Israel is doing and increasing anti-Semitism. But the person who is to blame for committing an act of anti-Semitism, if you go and you beat up a Jewish person or you do whatever, that person is still to blame for that anti-Semitism, right? It was fundamentally wrong for the Japanese to bomb Pearl Harbor, right? But it was America's response. If America bears the blame for putting the Japanese people in internment camp, the Japanese should be held responsible for bombing Pearl Harbor. They're not the ones who are responsible for the way America responded to that by taking that out wrongly on Japanese American people.
At least I'm a little bit my best. I want to give you some clarification explanation. I think that's a very different consciousness. And also, I want to know what you believe, because I may be a little bit ahistorical on this, but what do you think of Antifa? That is, I think, like a workers' uprising of Palestinian people. Yes, I'm wrong with you, but yeah.
Yes, my understanding is that Intifada means uprising. There are intifadas against Israel. I think there have also been intifadas against Arab regime, right? I think that during the Arab Spring they used the term intifada. So it means uprising, right? Which is why I didn't have that violent that uprising to be in different ways. It could be more violent, it could be not more violent. But the point is that to say that an anti-Semitic term doesn't make any sense, right? It's just a term being uprising, and it can be against any oppressive or unjust government. Jewish, Christian, or Muslim, right? So that's why I think this association of that term with being anti-Semitic doesn't make any sense. I just wanted to say I'm really, so for those of you who are fasting, I sometimes fast, I also sometimes fast, and I could never be anywhere near as coherent as all of you are, so I really am very grateful to you for doing this, especially. I know it's not going to be the easiest of all